The second one to remind you is, well, maybe, it's all cumulative, and maybe you need less and less as we go along. The second one, I remind you, is a strong recommendation that graduate and professional education, medicine, law, business is called out, they're called out as specific examples, but I assume this would mean public health and other, nursing, et cetera, should include strong bioethics component to help graduates understand and address the distinct ethical challenges that might arise in the practice of their chosen field. To me, this would resonate with what Laura Bishop was saying, that this should be embedded in a curriculum of each of these. Do we want to incorporate her language there? Nita's got a comment.
I do. I have two comments on this one. So one is, as a law professor, when I see legal fields, I get excited, but also concerned. And the concern is the word bioethics as opposed to ethics here. So, the language that you proposed, educators at the graduate and professional level, including the medical, public health, engineering, and legal fields to develop, integrate, and emphasize bioethics education. There are different ethics that matter to each of these fields. It's not always bioethics, which can be a narrower focus. And so I wonder if it's really emphasize ethics education, bioethics when it's relevant, but it's ethics education more generally that we are concerned about. This is a separate issue to me than what comes a little bit later, which is cultivate a culture of responsibility. Yeah. So that is a wonderful idea and a really important idea, but it's almost like a footnote in this recommendation right now. So I think NSF right now has a call for proposals out that is due in the next couple of months about people undertaking a project in STEM education to figure out how to cultivate a culture of responsibility. With the understanding that what are the institutional incentives and the broader community incentives that are necessary to cultivate a culture of responsibility, particularly in a time when the number of scientific retractions are on the rise, when there are incentives that may be leading people to falsification of data and overhyping of significance of their research, et cetera. So I'm gonna suggest we cabin this culture, cultivate a culture of responsibility, and that may be a bigger issue than something to drop inside of this.
That might be a separate recommendation, actually.
Which is
I like that.
To do so it just in the same way that the NSF is investing in figuring out what are the obstacles to a culture of responsibility and what are the necessary preconditions to help develop a better culture of responsibility. I think we should wholeheartedly support that call for proposals and greater research into what we can do to better incentivize a culture of responsibility. But that ties into the first part, which is the culture of responsibility in each of these different professions, while they have certain virtues that are similar to the virtues that you've outlined, they're not all bioethics, right? There's a common theme underneath them about cultivating responsible professional ethics within each of these that may be different. So,
along those lines, I think as Amy had suggested before, we really do, I think, want as a bioethics commission to focus on bioethics, and I think that the inclusion of other professions like law and engineering was sort of meant to only focus on the overlap between those issues, because I don't think it's our, while it's a good thing, I don't think it's our responsibility to comment on all of legal ethics, for instance, but to the extent that questions of bioethics come up in patent law, and tort law, whatever it might be, that's where the focus should be. So whatever we need to do to sort of wordsmith at least this recommendation to make sure that when we're talking about these other professions, it's about the bioethical issues within them rather than all of engineering ethics or all of legal ethics.
I kind of just respond to that, which is I completely agree that our charge is to focus on bioethics. I think then what we're talking about is a meaning shift in this recommendation, which is probably just wordsmithing, because that's probably what we were trying to get at. But the idea that every one of these fields needs bioethics education is probably not right. The idea that to the extent that bioethics intersects with each of these fields, we need to bring the principles of bioethics and education about bioethics to bear is right. It's just going to look very different in something like law than it is going to in medicine.
Yeah, so I think, and I'm not going to wordsmith it here, but I am going to try to summarize. I think what we want to say in the second recommendation is what we intended to say, but we need to say it clearly, is that it is important that all of the relevant professions, and almost all the professions are relevant, although I wouldn't, if we're going to list medicine, law, and business as a strange trio, you would put engineering in there. But in any case, I think what we want to say is that there ought to be a bioethics component to the applied ethics
Of the respective fields.
of the fields, and that means there ought to be applied ethics, and there ought to be a bioethics component of the applied ethics.
I think that's.
And I think we should use the term applied ethics, not just ethics, because at this level, what is needed is an understanding of how ethics applies to the fields. So we can wordsmith it, but I think it has to have, it is about having some component of bioethics, but it's within the larger that there has to be applied ethics. You wouldn't just scoop down in law and just do bioethics. Or, for that matter, in engineering, there's, some of the ethics won't be bioethics.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
No, they're not.
I'd like to lobby, Amy, though, to keep business in there.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean
sure.
taking
Oh,
it
sure.
out.
Okay.
Oh, no, I want.
Industry and
Got
it's
it.
about corporate
I wasn't
responsibility
taking
and-
it out. I was
Okay.
just saying, if you have business in there, you certainly should have engineering
No,
in there
there's
too.
along the social work, we haven't talked about, have
Yeah.
their own professional schools,
Yeah.
all professional
And it
schools,
does say,
nursing.
in
Yeah.
this version, which is not the final version, it says including in, so it's technically correct. It just struck me as strange to have that trio without engineering in there, given that we began with synthetic biology.
Let's move, given the time.
Yep.
And the next one, I have a hard time making this one controversial. The next one is voicing our support for teacher training and professional development in this area. Any, yeah. All in favor, say aye.
Yeah,
So-
no.
so-
And obviously, we're going to have to be specific about, given that there is teacher training and given that deliberative ways of teaching are effective, and ethics there are great case studies here, provide teachers both, we said this earlier, with teaching modules and training in them.
Yeah,
Yep,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it would be nice just to recognize the modules that our staff has been
Yep.
creating here, to talk about that both as a resource, but as a potential model for output of some other bioethics-based organizations that as they create reports to be able to similarly create educational, that this would fulfill and help advance this mission, make their research and make their work more accessible by creating modules.
As
that
we
would be
have been a good
accessible.
model for that.
Yes,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
great, that's great. Now, the last one in this is, I don't think it's controversial, I just think it's difficult.
Yeah.
And that's developing
Correct.
effective metrics to
Yeah.
evaluate ethics education.
So
What does success
So
look
let
like?
me, let me just say I agree with this in theory, which means, since I'm a theorist, I agree with it. But I worry about what it conveys in practice. We don't measure very much of the effectiveness of education now, and to single out measuring bioethics education, which all too often is done, suggests that bioethics education, just suggests, it implies, it doesn't say it, is more controversial, less fundamental than history education or math education. I mean, we don't measure a lot of education. And so how to say this in a way that I would say it should be evaluated as other forms of education are evaluated, and with the same relevant standards of evaluating it, because it's not that I don't want to evaluate it, we do and we call for evaluating it, but I don't want to suggest that it is in more need of evaluation than any other form of education. So how do you evaluate history education, for example, which all schools teach? I was taught American history, I was taught New York State history. How do you evaluate that? So one of the things I would say about ethics education is one of the ways of evaluating any education is forget about the outcomes. Would you want a person to grow up in our society, whether in their role as a family member or in their role as a citizen, without being taught ethics? And the answer to that is obviously no, and so we have to teach it. And then I think the recommendations is, since we have to teach it, let's find the most effective ways of teaching it and try to figure out how to evaluate that. Whereas this sounds like we're just evaluating whether we should have it or not. It would be really barbaric not to have an education in the kinds of ethics we're talking about: evidence-based reasoning, honesty, care for others, respect for others. So that's my, so I think we do need to reword this, but not retreat from it.
I took the spirit of this recommendation to be slightly different because I agree with what you're saying, which is we don't want to single out bioethics education when we're already not evaluating other education, which we should be doing, but it's very difficult to do. So what I took the spirit of this to be was that we are, that there isn't, you're not testing for a right answer at the end of the day. You're testing for particular types of skills that bioethics education can impart. And so the way to judge whether or not bioethics education is effective is by measuring whether or not there is an improvement in those skills. I think a different way to frame this then would be to say that the goal of ethics education is not to reach any particular outcome, that a good way to define what is an effective program is one that clearly articulates what the types of skills and virtues are that you're trying to cultivate, and ensuring that the curriculum advances the teaching of those particular types of skills and virtues, as opposed, and because when we talk about some of the supporting text for this, it's about good judgment and measuring through surveys whether or not people have gained logical and moral reasoning skills, which is to say, at the outset, and when you are later reflecting upon your program, you should ensure that it is satisfying a particular set of goals, not that people have learned specific what to think, but particular methodologies for thinking. And so I think setting up what the guideposts are for effective education in this domain is a good thing for us to impart, not that we're asking for a particular type of evaluation to occur for this area, unlike other areas.
I think what we're trying to say here is that there are certain kinds of things that we could measure, like we could find out whether people know how to add 2 + 2 and what it means, right? And there's a test that you could do to administer it. There are other types of things, such as bioethics, where you cannot use such a test to evaluate it. But it ought to be possible for us to be able to ask the questions: what is the impact of this education on the society as a whole? And I don't know what the metric is, but it is absolutely appropriate for us to ask that and be able to show, if we can show it. And that's the reason why this recommendation says that we should support research to try to develop those metrics to do that. And to be able to say 10 years from now or 20 years from now, as a result of the implementation of this program, that our society is better than what we started out with.
Let me just say that's hard. It's more complicated than that, because the 2 + 2 isn't a good analogy. history education is a good analogy. How do you show that an education in history makes our society better? It's extreme, the causality is just, there are no, you know, the causal links are just, it is, by the way, it isn't all that easy to show that math education makes our society better. It's easy to show that people succeed on math, you know, math tests. But history is the better example because it would be equally, it's important to teach history and teach it well. And it's important to teach ethics and teach it well. And the question is, how do you judge whether it's being taught well? And obviously that has to do with learning because you want to figure out people's learning. And there are certain metrics. And in both cases, but I'll pick out ethics, it's how well students can reason about certain things, and it's also how well they develop certain habits, like respect, you know, listening to others, offering their views honestly, and so on. And those, by inference, are better for our society. But you actually couldn't show the huge link to our society is better in some testable ways because of that. What you can show, and maybe Raju, you're pointing to this, is that, so our founding fathers famously said, and multiples of them said, that a democracy can only flourish with an educated public, and they very much believed in character education and education in reasoning as well. And there are correlations between a very well-educated citizenry and the flourishing of societies. But there's no causal link between a certain kind of ethics education or history education, or for that matter, some science education. It's just, that's a bridge too far.
Maybe, you know, one of the arguments that we make, and I don't need to tell many of you, is that we consider that our American system of liberal arts education is very good.
Yeah.
And the reason why is the diversity of things that we teach students. And one of the most important things that we say that we teach is to reason.
Yes. And ethics
and we
reasoning
can
is
make
part
an
of that.
argument in this case and say to provide that reasoning, this is an additional tool
It's
to
essential
do that.
part of it.
Right, or to make such a essential part of that, and therefore it would have value.
Yes, yes.
And that's, if we could say that, that's also good.
Yes, and I think we can say that, and we should say that, and that goes to Nita's, that we can't measure so much the outcome as the process and the importance of the process in a liberal arts and science, a broad education.
Seems to me there are two reasons that measuring things are important in education. One is that, and some of you have been saying this, but the way I think about it is in order to justify doing it, it has to be shown that you achieve your goals by doing it. So in other words, by offering education, you achieve the goals, which requires first figuring out what the goals are and then saying, does this achieve them? The second thing is that, you know, education comes in different qualities. You know, some is better than others. It's all education, but it's not, and maybe they're connected. The poorer quality education doesn't achieve the goals, but it's certainly, you know, you can teach the same thing in a variety of different ways. And so we need to have metrics or ways of measuring the quality as well.
Let's be careful about the word metrics.
Yeah, I don't like the word
because
metrics.
You have to ask, are you willing to get rid of history education in our schools because it is extremely difficult to measure its success on a test? I mean, you can measure on a test whether students know names, dates, facts, and so on, and those are important. It's very hard to measure how, you know, history measure on a test.
Sure.
This goes to the Common Core, but I think measuring how literate students are in being able to reason about history and reason about ethics is something that's important. I'd just like us to make sure we use the appropriate,
Words.
Why don't we
I
modify that
absolute-
word?
can I
Why don't we
just say one-
modify that word then? Because what we're really talking about in this recommendation is not necessarily developing effective metrics, but develop effective assessment to determine
Assessment.
the effectiveness of ethics education. Is
yes.
that better?
I very much agree with that for two reasons. One, as Amy suggested earlier, that there's almost a sense when one is demanding, sort of patient-level outcome, measures for the success of ethics, that claim is not made of biochemistry education, or there's sort of a sense that this is got to prove itself to be valuable before we will put it into the curriculum. And I think that that's wrong. And then second, that the kinds of measures that are used for this might not be surveys, for instance. When I first got to New York Medical College, I had a sort of carte blanche to start this education program for the medical students, and I gave four sentence answer to 10 questions was going to be the test. I had students paging me the night before, panicked that they had never taken an essay test. 4 sentences is an essay. But there's this sort of obsession with measurement in this sort of narrow sense that is implied by a word like metrics. And I think that we have to recognize that for ethics, there may be other measures that are used for evaluating both the performance of the students and overall effectiveness of a particular program. There's a place for some of those things. I've done some surveys of knowledge. I've done some surveys of confidence, one's perceived self-efficacy in dealing with ethical questions, but it's not the whole game, and that's important.
Having said that, I agree with everything that's said. I don't want to retreat from the idea that we want to be able to assess how well ethics education cultivates moral reasoning and skills, and we can do that. And one of the ways you do it is asking students to write brief defenses of the positions they most disagree with and what their response would be, and evaluating them. And you do a before and after. I've done it in my course, and it's striking how poor students are at the beginning of being taught this, and how much they can develop those skills, which are absolutely essential. So we're not retreating from we just want to assessment, right?
And there are many examples. Roger, you brought up, the fundamentals of liberal arts education, and when one goes back to those original concepts, we've dropped some of them. The trivium, quadrivium, that coupling between rhetoric and didactic, which is really the only remnant of that on our campus. I shouldn't say the only remnant. A clear remnant of that on our campus would be our debate team, where regardless of what you believe, I may ask you to argue a position, and you may have the misfortune of having to argue a position that is counter to what you believe. It forces you to listen.
And a lot of debate for and against are ethical issues, by the way.
Exactly so. So there are mechanisms to do this and to assess people's abilities with those skills. And I think that exists on all of our campuses, but I could imagine how it could exist more broadly and be applied here. Other thoughts on this one? I think we're converging, actually.
Steve has something.
I'm sorry, Steve.
I very much like the way that Raju separated the ethics education with the ethical behavior that's the goal of the goal of the ethics education. And I think that's obviously much harder to measure.
Right.
It's aspirational,
Right.
but highlighting that distinction that you raised to me is important. Yeah.
Use that.
I guess I'm also saying something a little bit more, that, whatever the profession is, right? Any one of us, whether we have MDs or PhDs or some other degrees, somehow we were said we were qualified to do what we're doing, right? And so that means that there was some measure by which people would be able to say that Raju, is qualified to be a geneticist. And so it may not be possible in the case of ethics to be able to have such a measure, right? If we don't, if that's the reason, then we could say, let's find out if there are methods, or let's do research to find out such methods. Or another stream that I hear is that there is intrinsic problem with testing, and testing is bad, and they would not achieve the kinds of goals that we want to achieve. And I'm trying to make a distinction between those two.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would say it's bad. I think it's
It has
So I
limits.
would just say to the first, which I agree with, that we all, people get professionally accredited, if you will. And I would say, apropos of bioethics education, that we ought to be sure that those accreditations include ethics education, because all professions are justified by the way they serve society, and the basic, ethics of professions, especially the ones represented around this table, have to include some understanding and ability to have the virtues and the skills of ethical as well as scientific reasoning. And they ought to, I go back, they ought to be assessed, in parallel with the other assessments. So we're not backing away. But the way that they can be best assessed varies. How do we assess how well doctors treat their patients? It's very different the way we assess the ability of doctors to, if they're surgeons, operate on people, or if they're researchers, to understand the intricacies of neuroscience at the cutting edge. But all of those are part of what we require of, and ought to require of professionals, and they have to be assessed in different ways, appropriate to their, that's all. I mean, I just think that that's, and we do evaluate doctors now for how their patient care, and we teach them, and that's part of bioethics teaching, and I'm very proud of medical schools that they do it more than they did it in the past.
Christine and Dan, and I think that's going to wrap up this part.
So just a couple of concurrent activities that are going on that raise some of these similar issues. There's been an effort, a request at the NIH to start to think about how to measure the impact of bioethics research. And so one of the Association of Directors of Bioethics Programs took this on as a task to try to figure out, how you would measure it. And what they first realized is that you needed to be very explicit about what the goals are, and that took a whole long list of effort to figure that out. The other is the American Society of Bioethics and the Humanities is working on a method for accrediting, I guess, or figuring out the qualities of people who do clinical ethics consultation and how to assess those. And it's a very difficult task because some of them are, skills, but that need to be observed, not just talked about. So there's a lot of really interesting issues going on right now in terms of how to assess different things in the world of bioethics. But I want to emphasize one thing that Amy said earlier, and I think one of the things we should actually say somehow is that there's no reason that bioethics should be held to a different standard than any other field. I mean, everything needs to be evaluated in terms of how well it works to do what it's supposed to be doing, but there's nothing about bioethics that needs more evaluation or more scrutiny than other things.
And just on the testing, since we talked about it earlier, and there is a kind of push for more testing in our society and a concern of teaching to the test, and this gets much more to early, up through 12th grade, and is very relevant to how well we teach everybody, including the students who are most at risk. When you teach to the test, you can get good test results that fade almost immediately after the test. What we're talking about in ethics education is an education along the lines of what we care about in educating people to be good professionals as well as good people, a lasting education. And we have to make sure that that some of the effects of the education are going to be, they may not be testable in the short run. They may take longer to test. So I just think there's some caveats here, and I say this all in full support of the recommendation that we evaluate.
Dan, last word on this,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
you've got.
No, as others have said, I mean, ethics is one subject in teaching a medical student or a scientist, right? And there would have to be methods of evaluating that the person has competence in all the fields that are necessary to complete the degree. So that should be done. For ethics, at least from the standpoint of medical students that I teach, we can test their knowledge. That can be done. That they know what a living will is, for instance. We can test their reasoning skills. It's probably better done by essays, right?
Yes.
And evaluated that way. For evaluating programs, you can test things like perceived self-efficacy or confidence in the ability to carry out certain activities. You can do what are called OSCEs, that you can see whether they have the skills actually to do these with simulated patients or something like that. But then ultimately there is always standardly an evaluation of their behavior, which is really looking more at character. It's usually not done well, and this is part of the strength of this recommendation, is do better on all of these kinds of evaluations. But there is humanism and professionalism is one category on every single clinical rotation that a medical student is on. And we don't do a good job of evaluating that, can do better. And we have to do better, I think, at making sure when someone is not meeting standards that we really call them on that. And so this asking for better assessments can cover all of those sorts of things in at least medicine, but I'm sure in other fields as well.
So I'll give you an example a real example that happened that just shows how basic ethics education, if taken to heart, and not just to mind but to heart, can help in the most advanced medical practices. So a very excellent surgeon was confronted with a patient who was given 2 pieces of advice on 2 different surgeries options, and she asked him, why should I choose this one that you recommended over the other one that another surgeon recommended? And his answer, and I quote, was, because I said so, end quote. And that, that's you can't know for sure whether, if that doctor had gone through education that said you should give reasons for out of respect for the patient. But what you know is that we owe it to patients and to make sure that even the best surgeons learn that giving reasons is part of respecting people. And that did not happen to me, but it happened to someone I know really well, and she came back and she said, can you believe it? And no, she got reasons before she did it, but she wasn't going to do it without some reasons for doing one or another. And it's just good. Raju asked for negative examples before. That's just such there are, and if this weren't real, I wouldn't have given it to you because you'd think, oh, it's just made up. But this is a real terrific surgeon who's extraordinarily smart, and yet that's the answer he gave, so.
I hate to cut you off,
Yes.
but you're
We're
digging
going
into
on.
your next session.
I'm
So-
happy to do it. Okay, so we're moving on to consider the relationship between deliberation and bioethics education. We've already done some of this, but we have some provisional recommendations on this. We've heard from experts in education that using deliberation as an educational tool builds the skills that will help students become informed and active participants in their communities. Diana Hess's work used structured, deliberative activities in the classroom, and it shows that students learn how to deliberate to reach policy consensus on controversial ethical and political issues, and also learn how to respect one another. They also learn the virtues of listening and responding and respecting. Bioethics education can be an important forum for introducing deliberative methods into diverse educational settings, and she actually looks at different educational settings, ranging from ones in which the students are diverse and have diverse views, which is optimal for deliberation, to ones where, because of the communities, they're more homogeneous. And she shows how teachers have to learn different ways of teaching in those settings. In the first, you draw out the diversity of views. In the second, you have to actually have students role play, and the teacher has to play an active role in making sure minority opinions get out there. We also heard from organizers and participants in deliberative activities with the general public, such as What Next California deliberative poll and the public dialogue on mitochondrial donation in the United Kingdom, about the important educational function of these activities, which fosters a more informed and engaged public. So we also heard how deliberation is educational, as Dan says, outside of schools, in the public realm. As a public voice and forum for bioethics on the national level, our efforts to bring deliberative process and values to bear on some of the most pressing bioethical questions, and to extend our work through educational materials, underscores this mutually reinforcing function of deliberation and ethics education. And what we believe, and what we have demonstrated, and what other scholars have demonstrated, is this creates a virtuous circle. As deliberation facilitates education, and bioethics education builds skills and virtues of deliberation. So with these examples of the intersection of deliberation and bioethics education on our minds, here are two recommendations for our consideration. First, as we've seen in our work on topics as diverse as synthetic biology, whole genome sequencing, and cognitive enhancement, developments in health, science, and technology can raise significant bioethical questions that need robust and informed public discussion and deliberation. Those involved in education and deliberation should use the tools in both of these domains to facilitate greater public engagement with these questions. And I hasten to add, we need to give sort of examples of how that works, right? Second, the Bioethics Commission has been a leader in bioethics education by developing publicly available teaching tools that make our work accessible to anyone wanting to study or teach bioethics. Following our report on the Public Health Service supported research on sexually transmitted diseases in Guatemala in the 1940s, we published a study guide. It's available in a Spanish translation, and it uses original sources as well as our analysis to make the ethical elements of this case vivid for teaching. We developed several case studies around topics of our Ethics in Ebola report that are designed to bring bioethics to life for professionals in public health and other related fields who might have received little, if any, ethics education. And these are just two examples from a catalog of over 50 teaching tools that the Commission has created to date. National bioethics commissions have an important role to play in supporting public bioethics education and contributing to national discourse and deliberations on health, science, and technology policy in bioethical areas. Future bioethics commissions, and this is our recommendation, and other bioethics organizations and organizations that take on bioethical issues should continue to explore and advance their educational and democratic role, and should develop and promote accessible educational tools to enable teachers at all levels to integrate deliberation and bioethics into their classrooms. And I open that up for our discussion and whether we agree with these recommendations, whether there are two levels of questions. One, do we fundamentally agree with the recommendations? And two, how would we revise, modify, improve them? Anyone? Fundamentally agree, yeah. Yeah.
Fundamentally agree with one small issue.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about analytical reasoning as part of what we want to teach and utilize. But I'm also wondering about the development of empathy and caring.
Yeah.
And maybe we should explicitly integrate in our account of what we're aiming for are these capacities as well.
Yeah. So,
Dan, you
yeah,
look worried about that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I'm not
yeah.
sure that those are precise,
Yeah.
I agree that those are good virtues, but I think they belong more in the sort of virtues of education, particularly for professionals who are dealing with students or persons who are particularly ill, through medicine and nursing and other professions. I'm not sure that that's part of the virtues that are specific to democratic deliberation, where I think a sort of public beneficence, those kinds of, or benevolence, I guess would be the virtue associated with it, would be more the kinds of equivalents to that sphere. So I think you can, to the extent that they are teaching, to care about your students, to the extent that one is a clinician, to care about one's patients would be good. But I think in the public sphere, that it's more at the level of public benevolence, respect, being someone who's able to listen, are more the kinds of virtues I'd think about for this section that schools could teach that would then overlap with public deliberation. And this is similar to your sort of question about the clinical bedside consultation versus public policy.
Since this, again, brings up obviously it's the fusion, deliberation and education. Not specific to these recommendations necessarily, but an observation. I have caught myself using a phrase today, and I've heard others use it. I've been using the phrase as a shorthand for something I actually do believe, but the phrase itself I don't believe. And I just want to make sure. And it has to do with our notion that deliberation on biomedical ethics and bioethics is not intended to reach an outcome. I actually don't think I believe that. I believe that deliberation on ethics may not converge to a single outcome, but the whole reason for doing it is to drive toward an outcome. And are we
Yes.
comfortable with that? And we have said this
yes.
repeatedly, well, it doesn't go to an outcome, it doesn't come to a single. The fact is, it's intended. We're trying to get to resolution, but we need to understand that there's value in that process, and that the process may not necessarily, in every case, converge to a single outcome. So, yeah, I just wanted to
So,
clarification.
so there's education and there's the process of democratic deliberation for a particular policy, right? So I think with respect to a particular policy, there are multiple purposes of democratic deliberation. One of them, at the end of the process, if you were seeking to adopt
Yes.
a policy, you were actually recommending and adopting a policy. But the process of hearing and including viewpoints that influence the outcome and that enables people to be heard, I think, is a value in and of itself that is
Correct.
important toward the process and the
Yeah.
outcome.
So
But on the
that-
sorry,
go ahead. No, please, go
On
ahead.
the education side, what I've been saying repeatedly, which I think is different than in a policy setting, is we're not trying to impart upon students a particular outcome of thinking, meaning we're not trying to impart upon them that they come to believe that pick your topic, that
Yes.
X is the right answer. It's instead to empower them with a set of skills, tools, reasoning capabilities to be able to think through the process for themselves, to come to a place where they can answer for themselves how they would come out on an issue, or how they would reason through it, even if they don't have an ultimate conclusion of where they would come out on an issue. So I think they're separate issues. We're not trying to achieve a particular outcome in an educational setting with respect to what a student should think. We are trying to achieve an outcome in imparting upon them a set of skills that will enable them to think.
What I'm getting to also, though, is my personal motivation to be involved in the conversation is the possibility that there might be
So-
a solution, but I have to, as you say, value that process, understanding that at the end, we might not come up with a
solution to policy, but not
But-
for education,
So-
right? You don't want to
One of
have
the
a particular
concerns I have in
answer for
education,
students.
one of the concerns I see in education, and and you guys we all engage students that are so smart that in fact, I think they know that certain arguments will not converge, and they won't engage in them. And because, why ruffle feathers? Why do these things? What we're advocating is that there is value in pursuit of a solution, even if at the outset you don't think there is one, and even at the end of the day, there isn't one solution. But it's still what drives it is the notion that we should be working, we should be deliberating toward solutions, even if at the end of the day there isn't one.
So let me
I don't
just
think it's a
address
subtle
the
distinction.
deliberation and leave the okay, and Dan will do, you can do education. Let me do the deliberation. I think it's really important to recognize that, and we need to say this very clearly in the report, otherwise it will seem like the report isn't as strong in its recommendations and specific as it is. Deliberation, so in some sense you're both right, but here it is. Deliberation has two necessary and neither sufficient components. Deliberation is different than discussion. Discussion is just you air your views, and you can have ground rules for discussion. But deliberation seeks an outcome. It seeks a decision. And the decision might be deliberation in a classroom. The decision is we're going to deliberate about, and you name it, who is right in this historical argument? Who was right in the what was the right thing to, we're going to deliberate, what was the right thing to do in Guatemala in so it's a deliberation not because it's going to issue in a policy, it's a deliberation because you're asking your students to come to a decision at the end. Now, in a policy realm, as Jim says, you're seeking a policy decision. So that's the number one necessary condition of deliberation. The other necessary condition is that deliberation values respectful reason-giving among people who likely disagree. And it may not come to a consensus. And it would still be valued because that reason-giving is valuable. So that's just, a robust and pretty uncontroversial, otherwise you can't distinguish deliberation from discussion. So that's deliberation. Now I'll hand off education. And I think that's what we've been working with. That's what we've been evidencing in if you want, any deliberation in a classroom is in some sense a mock deliberation. It's modeling where the heart of deliberation is. The heart of deliberation began in non-democratic times when a king or head of state brought together, and it was usually his counselors, and asked them to deliberate with him about what he should do, which was better than him making the decision by himself. Now, democratically, we broaden it. So education.
Or actually, this may cut across both
But that's-
education and deliberation.
I
What I
didn't-
think I hear you're worried to be, Jim, is that you don't want this to, devolve into an endorsement of either moral subjectivism or of cultural or historical relativism. And so I agree that that's a concern, but I do not think that democratic deliberation implies that. What I think we may want to suggest as a virtue, both in education and in public discourse, is something I call epistemic moral humility, right? Which means that there's no reason to get into the argument unless you are committed to the belief that there might be a right answer to the question. But you also have to have the virtue of being humble enough to realize you may not have total hegemony on the answer, right? And that there will be other people who can disagree with you. You don't know everything. That there may be some cases in which we can all come to agree that it is wrong no matter what one's culture is, no matter what one's historical situation is. And I would argue that, you know, injecting spirochetes into somebody's, you know, cisterna magnum was wrong if you, you know, lived 2,000 years ago or in 1948, right? But there are other questions in which we're going to have lots of controversial objection. That does not mean that at the end of the day that if we have to answer a policy question or have to answer a clinical question, that some people you know, couldn't judge that ultimate decision to be wrong. But that's, so I think it may be important, if you wanted to be in the report, that this does not, that democratic deliberation does not imply either subjectivism or relativism, if that's the worry. Because I think that you have to come to an answer, there will be disagreements, and maybe the virtue, as I put it, is epistemic moral humility, that I have to admit that I may not be right. I may not be able to convince you that that I'm right.
But let me just get to Nita's point, and then let's see if Nita agrees. So I do want to make sure that we recognize that the goal of educating students in ethics is not, the first order goal is not that they agree on the right answer. That is not the goal. The goal is for them to reason well towards a conclusion. Now, obviously, if reasoning well towards a conclusion on certain issue, an easy issue, means you get to the same answer, that's great, because we're not subscribing to relativism on this. But we know on controversial issues that it's really important in educating that teachers not directly aim at the goal of getting agreement, because there are more efficient and ways of getting agreement that are bad, that are morally bad ways. And the primary value in teaching students in a deliberative way is to teach them the skills of and virtues of reasoning. And that's, I think, what you were saying, that the goal, the first order goal is that teaching.
Yes. Absolutely. So I agree that the process of deliberation is different than discussion.
Yeah.
There's a tension between deliberation and education sometimes when it comes to bioethics in the educational setting. There are some cases where everybody will agree, and the process of laying reasons out on the table should lead, you know, everybody to basically the same conclusion. There's some ethically impossible things that we think really one should, through the process of reason, arrive at a particular outcome. But, you know, to the concern that I've echoed a few times, one of the dangers in this area is if a teacher, if an educator is trying to guide people in the process of deliberation toward a particular outcome, and they have a particular ideological agenda, it doesn't teach students that it's okay to have a diversity of views. And so I want to make sure that we emphasize in this report that the purpose of deliberation in the classroom is to teach skills, not to drive toward a particular set of what to think.
Teach skills and the virtues of reasoning together respectfully, right?
And it could be debates, it could be requiring people to take the opposite side of what they might believe in order to engage in that process, not to try to have everybody reach the same conclusion or particular outcome.
So to teach skills and the virtues of reasoning respectfully together. Let me just, though, do if that's the Scylla, which is we want to avoid which is the shoals, what's the Charybdis. The Scylla is we want to avoid the idea that everybody has to come to this conclusion. The Charybdis is, I will illustrate it by a real example. The Charybdis is assumption of total moral relativism, right? So I had an example, this is a real example, no names, a high school teacher who assigned a set of readings on some practices of a cultural group in medicine with readings, and some of the practices were clearly, if you had some basic science knowledge, going to let people die, you know, rather than use the best science, you know, the best medicine. And the student wrote a paper saying that some of these practices were really medically ill-founded, and the comment that the teacher gave was that the student's views were equivalent to cultural genocide, because the student was arguing that it would be good for those practices to change. So while it is true that some teachers drive a conclusion, other teachers won't allow it if it's contrary to a group. So we have both issues that need to be avoided, and what we're recommending avoids both of them. And what Nita said, and there are, you know, there are some places that have extreme relativism and other places that have the opposite. We will say goodbye to a wonderful, we thank you, we thank you. Thank you. So I think we're all in agreement, but I don't want us to either.
I wanted to have the conversation.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
all, but
I think
we're in
we're really in agreement. Okay? We want to,
Great.
I think we're set, we can move on, I think,
If I could just, could I just?
Yes,
'cause I
please.
didn't respond to Dan's response to my
oh,
comment
yeah, yeah,
about-
please.
About empathy, and, because I need to think about it for a minute. And so I think I get the notion that, you know, which we've talked about quite a bit here, that deliberation, you know, might be seeking an outcome, education seeking to develop skills like analytic reasoning and the ability to deliberate together respectfully and so forth. I just puzzle over where all of that leaves empathy
Yeah.
and caring. And I don't think we've as a group articulated where those things fit in. You point out that, well, part of the professional training of doctors might be empathy as a clinical
yeah,
skill and so
I
forth.
agree.
But I just think that in ordinary life, we
Yes.
do think that developing empathy and
Yes,
caring are
for
important.
sure.
I just want to have us not forget that we may need to somehow think about that or
That could be in the
incorporate that in our,
moral character.
in
that's
where we, you know, where
Yeah,
we see it.
no,
Yeah.
for sure, you're
Yeah.
right.
I don't think we're in disagreement in that sense. It was just sort of where it would be
Where we
placed.
put it.
I think
put
it
it,
should be
yeah.
more in education than in the overlap between education and deliberation, that's all.
Yeah, I think that's the, and I think we should, I think Ebola and Guatemala both raise the issue of some virtue of empathy, caring, or respect for others. I mean, any one of those virtues would work, but they're mutually reinforcing, and they're all extremely important for ethics education. So I think it's just a matter of where we bring that up, and since it hadn't been brought up, I think it is important to bring it up. I think we've covered a lot of ground, and unless anybody has any other ground to cover, I want to just reiterate that, as I always do, that we invite anyone, speakers, people in the audience, those of you watching the webcast, to write us with any and all comments. You can submit your comments on our website, bioethics.gov, and I want to thank our wonderful commission members, our staff, the wonderful people who have participated today, and our vice chair, Jim, who I will ask if you would like to say any concluding
Only
words.
that this is another, It's always a pleasure to deliberate with this group. And Amy, again, thank you for your leadership.
Thank
Be
you,
well
and
all.
safe travels home, everybody. So thank you, and
Thank you.
thank you, thank you.